I never thought a collection of seashells could spark a full-blown neighborhood feud. But then Keran moved in. You know the type. Perfectly manicured lawns, suspiciously polished shoes, and opinions about literally everything. And apparently, my prized seashell collection was the hill she wanted to die on. It all started on a sunny Saturday morning. I was sipping coffee on my porch, carefully arranging my newest finds, a delicate pink conch, a spotted cowrie, a miniature scallop that seemed to glow in the sun, when I noticed her. Keran. Eyebrows arched, lips pursed, storming down the sidewalk like she had just spotted a crime scene. And in a way, she had. "You can't display those here," she said, pointing at my shells as if I'd just erected a neon sign in violation of some unspoken law. I blinked. "Excuse me?" "These," she gestured. Your shell nonsense. HOA rules clearly state no decorative clutter. It's an eyesore." Her words were sharp, precise, the kind that slice through your morning calm like a well-thrown boomerang. I wanted to laugh, out loud. But instead, I smiled politely and said, "Well, I checked the HOA rules. There's nothing about seashells." That's when the spark started. She whipped out a clipboard, probably thinking she looked official, and began quoting rules about aesthetic compliance and neighborhood harmony. I swear she said harmony at least 5 times in the span of 2 minutes. Meanwhile, my seashells sat there, serene and completely innocent, like tiny soldiers ready to defend my right to decorate my own porch. But it wasn't just about the shells. It was about control, about power. Keran wanted to dictate what could or couldn't exist in someone else's yard, and for some reason my pink conch had become the epicenter of her crusade. I could almost see the headlines, HOA Keran versus the Seashell Rebel. I spent the rest of the morning thinking, pacing back and forth, formulating a plan. There was no way I was letting a clipboard-wielding tyrant ruin my hobby. I needed a strategy, something clever, something undeniable. And as I stared at the shimmering shells in the sunlight, an idea began to form. It was risky. It might annoy the neighbors. But it had to be done. And that's when I realized, if Keran thought she could scare me into taking down my collection, she clearly hadn't met the wrong homeowner. Little did she know, this was about to become the most entertaining HOA showdown in the neighborhood's history. So I made a decision, one that would either end in victory or chaos. Do you want me to continue to Chapter 2, where things get wild with Keran's unexpected next move? I thought I had a plan to protect my seashells, but Keran was ready to escalate. By Monday morning, I found a sharply worded letter taped to my front door, the kind of letter that smells faintly of authority and judgment. Her handwriting was precise, almost surgical, like each letter had been measured with a ruler. "Your seashell display is in direct violation of HOA Rule 12.3b, it read. And yes, she italicized the B. I laughed so hard my coffee nearly went up my nose. Rule 12.3b didn't even mention seashells. It mentioned permanent obstructions in front yards. Whatever that meant. I had a small display on a table. Permanent? I didn't think so. But Keran wasn't interested in facts. She was interested in control, in making sure everyone around her followed her version of order. I decided it was time for diplomacy. I put on my nicest smile, grabbed a fresh cup of coffee, and went over to Keran's house. Maybe, I thought, we could negotiate. Surely a reasonable conversation could resolve this, right? I knocked. And waited. And waited. When she finally opened the door, it wasn't just Keran, it was her whole aura of judgment, practically oozing out the door. She crossed her arms and immediately launched into a speech about community standards and maintaining neighborhood beauty. Her words were rehearsed, like a courtroom argument she'd been practicing for days. "I just don't see why you need these shells," she said, tilting her head. "They're distracting. They clutter the visual harmony." I couldn't help it. I raised my eyebrows. "Distracting? They're seashells. I even arranged them by size and color. They're like tiny works of art. That's when she got creative. She waved a finger at me, her most dramatic gesture yet, and said, "If you don't remove them, I'll have no choice but to bring this to the board. And trust me, they take visual harmony very seriously." I almost chuckled at the threat. Almost. Walking back to my porch, I realized something important. Keran thought she could intimidate me, that I would just quietly pack up my shells and retreat. But I'm not the type to bow to a clipboard-wielding tyrant. If she wanted a war of aesthetics, I'd fight with strategy. I needed a plan that was clever, undeniable, and maybe just a little satisfying. I spent the next few days brainstorming. I measured, I photographed, I documented every shell, every arrangement, every small detail, and as I plotted, I realized one thing. Keran had no idea what was coming. She thought this was about rules. But really? This was about stubbornness, creativity, and making sure she learned a lesson she wouldn't forget. By Thursday, I had it all figured out. The perfect foolproof way to show Keran that seashells weren't just decoration, they were a statement. And if she thought she could stop me, she was about to find out exactly how wrong she was. Thursday morning, I woke up with one thought. It was showtime. Keran had no idea what was coming, and honestly, I was buzzing with excitement. I had spent days planning, measuring, and strategizing. This wasn't just about seashells anymore. It was about standing my ground, turning her absurd threats into the ultimate neighborhood spectacle. I stepped onto my porch, surveying the shells. Each one was carefully polished, arranged, and strategically positioned. I added some new pieces, too. A massive conch that seemed to command attention, and a spiral shell that caught the sunlight like it had a spotlight built in. Perfect. These weren't just shells, they were a statement. Then I remembered Keran's warning. She'd escalate to the HOA board if I didn't comply. So I did the next best thing. I decided to document everything. Photos, videos, even a time-lapse of me arranging the shells. Every angle, every detail, all perfectly legal according to the HOA rules. I wasn't just preparing a defense, I was preparing a spectacle. By mid-morning, Keran appeared, of course, peering over her perfectly trimmed hedge with her signature scowl. She had her phone out, probably planning to record me for the HOA. "I see you're still displaying those things," she called. I smiled and waved like a contestant on a bizarre reality show. "Yes, Keran, I am. I thought you'd enjoy them in all their glory." Her face twitched. I swear it did. Then she did something completely unexpected. She brought out her daughter. And the daughter? She was snapping selfies with my cows in the backyard, giggling as if she owned the place. At first I thought, fine, whatever. Kids take selfies. But then I noticed the perfect opportunity. A little spark of mischief lit up in my brain. I grabbed my camera and waited. The daughter posed again, this time standing right by the manure pile near the cows. I adjusted my angle, held back a grin, and prepared the perfect photobomb. Not malicious, just hilariously inconvenient. The camera clicked. The shot was taken, and let's just say it captured her excitement and my perfectly timed surprise in the background. Keran's daughter finally noticed. Her face went from joy to horror in 3 seconds flat. Keran, meanwhile, stormed over, trying to process what had just happened. I leaned casually on the porch railing, pointing to my seashells, my cows, and the perfectly timed photobomb. "Seems like everyone's enjoying the yard today," I said innocently. For the first time, Keran was speechless. The shells were safe. The cows had a moment of revenge, and the HOA rules still perfectly intact. I realized then that sometimes standing your ground isn't just about stubbornness, it's about creativity, timing, and a little bit of audacity. By the end of the day, the neighborhood was buzzing. People laughed, shared photos, and secretly admired my display. Keran, however, well, she had a lot to think about. By Friday morning, word had spread through the neighborhood. My seashells weren't just surviving, they were practically famous. Neighbors came by to see the display, snapping photos, complimenting the arrangement, and quietly laughing about Keran's meltdown. I watched it all unfold from my porch, feeling a mix of relief and quiet satisfaction. Keran, of course, was not happy. She paced back and forth outside her house, muttering about visual pollution and aesthetic standards. I could hear her through the hedge, practically inventing new HOA violations as she went along. But here's the thing. The HOA had no case. Every shell was on my property, perfectly legal, and my photobombing incident? Let's just say it didn't break any rules. The universe had for once handed me the perfect moral and comedic high ground. Then came the unexpected twist. Her daughter, the same one who had been so gleeful taking selfies with my cows, came by again, this time smiling nervously. I really like the shells, she said softly. I blinked, pleasantly surprised. She hesitated, then added, and the cows, they're funny. I laughed, and honestly, it felt like a small victory for reason in a world ruled by Karen-style chaos. Over the next week, the HOA board actually came by, not because of complaints, but because neighbors wanted to show off the display. They walked around, asking questions about the shells, the arrangements, and even the cows. Keran watched from her window, fuming silently, her aura of authority slowly deflating with every compliment visitors paid me. It was beautiful to watch, in a very quiet, non-violent kind of way. I realized then something important. This wasn't just about seashells or cows or photobombs. It was about standing your ground, being creative in the face of ridiculous opposition, and showing that rules don't give anyone the right to bully their neighbors. Keran had tried to intimidate me, but I had used a little planning, a little humor, and a lot of patience to turn the situation on its head. By the end of the month, Keran stopped mentioning the shells entirely. She walked past my porch with a forced smile, muttered something about quirky decor, and retreated indoors. My display remained untouched. My cows continued their daily antics, and the neighborhood had a new story to laugh about at HOA meetings for years to come. In the end, I learned something valuable. Sometimes the best way to deal with a Keran isn't arguing, isn't pleading, it's being smart, a little daring, and, if necessary, photobombing strategically. My seashells were safe, the cows had their revenge, and Keran, well, she had her first lesson in humility, and honestly, I couldn't have scripted a better ending myself. So next time someone tells you you can't, remember, sometimes the most satisfying victory is simply proving them wrong in style. Enjoying this wild HOA showdown story? Hit that subscribe button to catch more hilarious and unpredictable neighborhood adventures. Give this video a like if you laughed at my seashell strategy, and drop a comment below. What would you have done if Keran tried to ban your collection?